Off the western coast of Italy, in the mountain interior of Sardinia, a population has been living apart from the rest of Europe for thousands of years, and their DNA still shows it. For most of the 20th century, Sardinians were assumed to be simply another Mediterranean population, shaped by the same waves of farmers, traders, and conquerors that moved through Italy, Greece, and Spain. Geographic proximity implied genetic closeness. Nobody expected an island this close to the mainland to have stayed this separate. The assumption made sense on paper. Sardinia sits less than 200 kilometers from the Italian coast. Phoenician traders, Roman legions, and later Spanish and Genoese rulers all left cultural fingerprints on the island across thousands of years. If empires kept arriving, most researchers figured the gene pool kept mixing right along with them. The mountainous interior told a different story. Villages in the Central Highlands, particularly the region known as the Barbagia, were historically difficult to reach by road, let alone by invading armies. While coastal Sardinia absorbed wave after wave of newcomers, the interior stayed largely untouched. The genetic evidence confirming this came into focus through the Sardinia study, a large-scale population genetics project led by researchers, including Francesco Cucca at the National Research Council of Italy. By sequencing DNA from thousands of Sardinian volunteers, spanning coastal towns and highland villages alike, the team found something the old assumption never predicted. Highland Sardinians carry some of the highest concentrations of Neolithic farmer ancestry found anywhere in Europe, largely undiluted by the Bronze Age steppe migrations that reshaped the genetic makeup of nearly every other population on the continent. In other words, while the rest of Europe was absorbing new arrivals from the Pontic steppe roughly 5,000 years ago, interior Sardinia simply did not. That isolation carries a medical footnote worth pausing on. Sardinia has one of the highest documented rates of multiple sclerosis in the world, along with an elevated frequency of certain other autoimmune and inherited conditions. Researchers link this partly to genetic drift, the kind of change that happens naturally in small, isolated populations over many generations, unrelated to environment or lifestyle. Not every researcher agrees on how far back the isolation truly extends. Some argue that coastal admixture was more extensive than the highland data suggests, and that focusing on mountain villages paints an incomplete picture of the island as a whole. That is a fair caution, and it is one reason ongoing sequencing work continues to expand the sample beyond the original highland-heavy dataset. Two threads worth watching going forward: comparative work on other Mediterranean isolates, like the villages of the Basque interior, and newer ancient DNA sampling from Nuragic-era burial sites, the Bronze Age stone tower culture unique to Sardinia. Verify. Specific Nuragic-era genome study. What remains unresolved is simpler than it sounds. If a population this close to mainland Europe could stay this separate for thousands of years, hiding in plain sight along one of the most heavily traveled seas in history, the real question is, how many other isolates like it are still sitting unexamined, waiting for someone to finally sequence them?